Welcome to Jesus Changes Everything, a daily podcast dedicated to providing a fresh look at the ancient and glorious truth that Jesus not only reigns, but is busy about the business of bringing all things under subjection, that celebrates the wonder and the glory that he has been given all authority in heaven and on earth. It's my pleasure once again, as we do another one of our Gospel at Work segments, to welcome onto the program C.R. Stewart, or Chad Stewart, who is an author of a series of stories and books that are just doing wonderfully and are have a lot of brightness in their future. And I wanted to talk with him along these lines. Chad, welcome to Jesus Changes Everything.
Thank you for having me. Very excited.
Absolutely. Now, I don't want to put too much burden on you. I am the host, but can you tell us, maybe before you tell us about the stories, tell us about your process, your goals, what you were thinking, how, when you sat down with pen and pad or computer,
Sure.
You know, what you were hoping to accomplish.
Yeah, I'm originally from Newport Beach, California. I was back east for about 16 years in New England, Wellesley, Massachusetts, to be exact. I was a British literature major and European history major at Brown University, and then did my graduate work out there. And then I was actually in corporate America. I was in banking for a while and then got into investments. And while it was interesting, I was always a creative at heart. So a little over, I will call it 11 years now, I was down in Providence, Rhode Island at this horrible, boring seminar over the weekend that I had to go to. And that's where this whole thing started. And I started to drift, and I started to doodle. And I just doodled a simple circle, 3 lines, a basket, a boy and a girl, and I wrote the boy and the balloon. And I just sat there and I kind of looked at that and I thought, gosh, wouldn't that be interesting? That would be a fun story to write. And it started to come to me. And so I went home that weekend, and literally just on one piece of paper, nothing more, just bullet points, I started to unravel this story of Tom and Sarah, 12 years old. They're both orphans. They're up at this terrible place called Weatherly Orphanage up in Yorkshire, Northern England. It takes place in present time. Tom's been there for 6 years, and this is the year he's going to escape. And that's kind of the premise of it. And I said, okay, so where do they go? And so I spent 2 years in England, and you'll appreciate this too. I spent a year at L'Abri in Hampshire.
Oh, wonderful.
Francis Schaeffer's L'Abri, and that was amazing. And part of it was actually based a little bit on that experience. But anyway, and so somewhere along the line, they commandeer this hot air balloon, and they're chased by the illustrious Detective Gowerstone, who's renowned for catching escaped children and lost orphans. And so that was it. And I thought, that'd be a fun story. At the time, I was writing a lot of nonfiction business books, and I just needed that break. And so I sat down, and lo and behold, 4 years and 2,500 hours later, I finished book 1, Brickfield and Lost Crown, at 384 pages. Had no idea it would take me that long to write, but it was just it was a refinement. And I think also being within the ministry, it's always giving our best and doing our best.
Right.
Excuse me. And at the time when I was writing book 1, I just saw it as a standalone book. But by the time I finished it, I thought, you know what, I have a series here. And there was kind of a profound moment, too. I'm kind of sharing it with you and your listeners. But when I took it over to a friend's house that night, just that first draft of bullet point, and I knew at that moment that this was going to be a major ministry, a major, call it a media empire.
Uh-huh.
And I knew that, and I don't know why I knew that. And I had no desire to write children's books. I'm not married. I don't have kids. My sister is, and has, 3 wonderful children, but it's not like I thought, I'd love to be an author. I'd love to write children's books and stuff. So it was totally profound. And then from concept to launching it in August 2019, book 1, it took over 10 years, 10 years of hard work, 10 years of dedication, 10 years of commitment, trial and error. I mean, you name it, as far as going through the deserts and climbing the mountains. And since it's been launched, we've had massive success across the nation. It's a bestseller. It's actually one of the most awarded books in children's fiction. And it's part of a 7-book series. We launched book 2 July 4th of this year, Brickfield and the Rise of the Lion. That took 3,000 hours and 5 years, and that's 474 pages. And then I finished book 3. Britfield and the Return of the Prince. And so book 1 takes place in England, book two takes place in France, book 3 takes place in Italy. It'll be a 7-book series, and then book 4, which I'll start writing next year, starts in Eastern Europe, Vienna to be exact, and Russia, and then Asia, China. Book 6 is South America, and book 7 is the United States. And I think what's great about these books is, number one, the most important thing is it's based on family values, based on friendship, family, loyalty, and courage. It's got all these wonderful values. The whole thread or main theme across the whole story is family. It takes place in present time. And what's great about these books, and they're not only great for sort of your young adult audience, but they're great for adults, is that it's we call it stealth education. So as you're reading the book, you're learning about history, geography, art, architecture, and culture. And it's also just a fast-paced adventure novel. And we've noticed it's had a major impact, not only just on the general reading audience, especially elementary and middle school, but even children that struggle with reading. Which is kind of a caveat and a wonderful thing. I've gotten that feedback from different librarians, and they're like, I can't keep the book in there. And whenever I find someone that's like, a known, they have trouble reading or they never have gotten through a full book, I'll give them Britfield, and it's like one of the first books they've ever finished reading. And so it's having amazing impact across the nation. And now we're moving abroad, and we're in Canada and England and Germany, and then we'll be moving into Eastern Europe and across the world. So, and every book's going to be followed by a major motion picture. So that's kind of a quick overview. Yeah.
Well, it's very exciting. And I want to go back to the beginning because it just evoked a story that I'm sure you're familiar with when you're describing yourself at that boring seminar and that simple line drawing that you made. It goes to what I believe is so central to what makes so many Christian efforts in the arts a failure, because it reminds me of C.S. Lewis and his description of the beginning of Narnia, that he in fact says, I did not say to myself, how am I going to communicate substitutionary atonement to 7-year-old kids? But instead he started with an image in his head of the fawn and the snow and the carrying of the presents, and it went from there. And you can tell, as you're describing, it starts with the story. And the problem with so many Christians as they seek to write or produce different kinds of artwork is they start with the message and try to attach, like putting a steak on top of it to try to give it life. But it's dead already. It's really a sermon illustration and not a story. Sure. And I think that Lewis's description there fits so wonderfully with what he wrote about in Myth Became Fact, where he talks about that sort of apologetic dispute where some say, oh, well, the Eastern mystery religions had all these dying and rising gods, and Christianity is just a copy, and Epic of Gilgamesh and Noah. And instead of saying, well, no, ours is different this way, this way, this way, this way, Lewis says, of course, everybody else's sort of meta story or Jungian concept matches the true one because it's the substance of what things are made of. That this is God's world, and God's world is going to reflect God's story. And so when you come and do this in your stories, I suspect it's much the same thing, isn't it? That you're trying to show the world as it is, and in doing so, you're not hiding the Christian faith, but actually revealing it.
Oh, I love that. Absolutely. And I parallel a lot with C.S. Lewis. I'm a big fan, of course, read his biographies. But no, and I love what you said too. It's a couple things. One is it's story. It's all about the story. A lot of people have a concept, and we've dealt with a lot of film writers and Christian script writers, and they all want, $5-10 million to go out and do a movie. And it's like, and they've written the script and they're the director and the actor. And it's just like, it's, as Christians, we're called to the highest level of excellence, period. It's not about being as good as Hollywood. It's about being better than Hollywood. Right. And we live in this flash over substance society where it's like, we want it now. I'll be honest. Every overnight success takes at least 1 to 2 decades, and the difference between an amateur and a professional is about 10,000 hours. And that's very, very accurate. And that's what you do, and that's that perseverance. That's the race that we've been called to run. But no, I this is a mainstream book. You know what I mean? I'm not preaching to the choir. This is just a great story, anchored in family values. Between you and I, it's anchored in biblical values, but they're family values. And so why preach to the choir? And it's like, and that's why so much of the faith-based film market, set aside even from the books, is just languishing. You know what I mean? They should be knocking it out of the park. And there's a couple that are finally getting into the rhythm. But just write a great story, like The Blind Side, you know? And it's like, what's been done since The Blind Side? Nothing. Done for $30 million. Overall, $500 million, you know, and it was just a simple story. That was just a great story. And the family just happened to be Christian. And they practiced those Christian values of giving and taking someone, you know what I mean? Yeah. And that's what you need to do. Stop preaching to the choir. And that's why we like to call it even stealth evangelism, such as stealth education. You know what I mean? It's just, and so you really nailed it there. And the story is everything. And from that story, everything developed. I didn't try to write a 400-page book. I thought, you know, maybe 250, but I trusted the story, and it just took me. I'm just finishing book 3, coming in at 525 pages. And again, I'm not like a writer. Some people just like, they marvel at it, right? And it's like 800 pages. And I'm like, where do you get the time to write 800 pages? But you just trust the story. And when the story's there, if the story wants to be 250 pages, 300 pages, it'll be 300 pages. But you've got to trust the story, and don't waste time with descriptions and too much of the fluff and stuff. Just stick to the characters, stick to the story. But I'll give it back to you, but you nailed it. And everything I do, it's all about the drive of the story, and then the character arcs and the character drive. So,
well, you know, I've got, I'm not sure when this will go out, probably a few days after this goes out, I'm opening what we call the Shepherd's College. It's a pastoral preparation program that says, let's look at what the Bible calls us to instead of the academic model. Yes, we want to know things. We want to be able to learn things, but it's a character issue. And as I was putting this curriculum together, I actually devoted, multiple classes to what I would call the humanities. So I've got people coming who are preparing for gospel ministry who I'm saying, if you want to do it my way, one thing you're going to have to do is you're going to have to read the Odyssey, and you're going to have to read Candide, and you're going to have to read Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and you're going to have to read the Napoleon of Notting Hill, G.K. Chesterton, because I'm so absolutely persuaded it marries together with what we call biblical theology that looks at the story of redemption as a story. Not that it's false. This is, again, Lewis and Myth Made Fact. Not that it's false, but that it has the story elements, which is actually one of those places where the postmoderns had something right. That when we're pushing back, we make the mistake of being modernists as against the postmodernists and try and turn our faith into science. I always say it this way: if you take a rose and you really want to know what the rose is, and you cut off a petal and stick it on a slide and stick it under the microscope, you're actually getting farther away from the rose. You're not getting closer to it. Lewis does the same thing in when Ramandu in The Voyage of the Dawn Treader, he's the retired star, and Eustace, who pretty much deserved the name, Eustace says to him, in my world, stars are great big balls of burning gas. And Ramandu says that may be what they're made of, but that's not what they are. And so, again, absolutely committed I am to the truth of Scripture, the truth of the gospel, all of it. But I want my students to understand that what's going on in space and time is God's great story of redemption. It's as Nathan Wilson, N.D. Wilson, you may be familiar with, another successful Christian children's writer, who's I've known for decades. He says, now I'm going to cut myself off here. I don't know where I was going. I lost it.
That's okay.
Let me go. Figure a way to go back.
You're talking about the arts, the books, the literature, the stories, the redemption.
Oh, yes. Got it. Thank you. N.D. Wilson describes the Bible story as boy slays the dragon and gets the girl.
Oh, funny.
Which I just think is a great summary of not just the Bible, but history.
Sure.
Yeah. Go ahead.
In story writing and script writing, the basic scenario is boy wants girl, boy gets girl, boy loses girl, boy gets girl back. You know?
1 second.
And
hang on a second. My love, I'm in the middle of an interview.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
That's okay. How could you know? I'll call you back when I'm done.
Okay.
Bye-bye, darling. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay. Well, I was just saying it's boy gets girl, boy loses girl, boy gets girl back. You know, that's their typical 3-act structure. What's funny about these stories is my training was actually in script writing, and I'm very grateful for that. So I learned that sort of rigid script writing, meaning if you have a 90-minute movie, you have 90 pages. You don't have 95. You don't have 100. People are like, hey, I got this 200-page script. I'm like, what is it, a miniseries? So it's like it teaches you economy of words. It teaches you the 3-act structure, the plot points, and everything. And so when I wrote book 1, I wasn't thinking, hey, let me set it up, with the movie. But it was so subconsciously in my mind that it's beautiful how it laid out. And I'd say about 90% of the people that read book 1 say it reads like a movie. And so since then, I've really been using that specific structure, fast-paced. But I love what you're talking about. I mean, you're talking to a British literature major, so and European history major. I love the arts, and I love the Bronte sisters. And remember driving up on this. You'll appreciate this, but it was this. I was kind of doing a tour of England, and I was coming up, and it was on a Sunday, and it was in the morning, and it was very foggy. And I was in the moor, like you hear about the moors. What are moors, right? And heather, right? And so it's like this low hanging fog. And I come up to the little city, Hayworth, I think it was, and their father was a pastor, a teacher, and it's a medieval town. And you come up this cobblestone street. It was all wet, foggy. The church is at the very top. It's where he used to teach. It's where they're buried. The bell was ringing, and I was just like, wow! It was just like straight out of one of Jane Eyre or something, you know. But anyway, so I mean, I love that history. I love the stories. I've learned a lot from them. You know, I'm not saying they were Christians. You know what I mean? But it's taking the narratives. It's taking some of these stories. Jane Austen is another one of my favorites. Obviously, Charles Dickens. I mean, he got to the heart of the matter. I mean, I was hugely influenced by him with the orphanage. It's like people are saying, why an orphanage? And it's, and I'm like, why not? But
right, of course.
But as a writer too, it's just like you either have one parent, two parents, or you have no parents. And so it's like there's only 3 choices. And I think when they're orphans, I think it just adds that mystique, that mystery. What happened? And it also kind of gives you a little more passion for them. And I always like to tell people, what if you, like Tom, if you grew up your whole life being an orphan and one day you find out your parents might be alive?
Yeah.
And that's the spark within Britfield and Lost Crown. So, but go ahead. Yeah.
Well, we're actually, I'm sorry to say, running out of time. Let me make sure people know they can go and learn about sort of this stealth part at Brit Institute. Our
main website, an award-winning website, is Britfield.com, Britfield, Britfield.com. It's amazing. It's got 400 pictures of England. So everywhere where Tom and Sarah go are real places, real locations, and you can experience it. We have interactive maps. We also have the books there. We also have an 83-page study guide based on national standards. So Britfield and Lost Crown can be taught in the classroom. It's being taught in many schools right now, and it's great for the homeschool group too. So it's that's wonderful. And then the Britfield Institute, which is our nonprofit, and that our focus is bringing creativity and the arts back into the classrooms. So
excellent. Well, I am so grateful for your time and your effort here, but also those thousands and thousands of efforts that are putting out these books. I pray that these next 4 go well, and all of these movies to come. I'm looking forward to it. And I hope we'll have occasion to have you back on again sometime if you'd be willing. And ask for God's blessings on you.
Well, thank you. And yeah, let's. I feel like we just got started.
Yes, absolutely. Yep.
All right, great.
You've been listening to the Jesus Changes Everything podcast, a production of Dunamis Fellowship, the teaching outreach of Dr. R.C. Sproul Jr. If you've enjoyed this podcast, we encourage you to subscribe, which you can do at all the usual outlets, to tell your friends, and to spread the word. To learn more about the work of Dunamis Fellowship, please visit rcsproulJR.com and join us next time on Jesus Changes Everything.